So it looks like the Disney live-action remakes aren't going away anytime soon. Lilo & Stitch just made more money in its opening weekend than the original did in its entire theatrical run, and it managed that while going up against the president of movies himself. And yeah, we all hate the live-action remakes. Even though some of them have been better than others, their mere existence just represents the total lack of confidence big studios like Disney seem to have in financing original movies. But you can see where they're coming from. Mufasa made $700 million, The Little Mermaid made $570 million, The Lion King $1.6 billion, Aladdin $1 billion, Beauty and the Beast $1.2 billion. With just a handful of exceptions, these live-action remakes have been as reliably profitable for Disney as the MCU, even if we all know how stupid it is that everyone keeps referring to this completely animated movie as the live-action Lion King. So like it or not, there is clearly a market out there for these remakes. And well, you know that saying, if you can't beat them, join them? Well, my pitch to Disney is this. If you're going to insist on carrying on with these live-action remakes, then please, make a live-action remake of Treasure Planet. Treasure Planet was the 2002 passion project by John Musker and Ron Clements, the directing and writing pair who made 3 of the 10 movies that made up the Disney Renaissance in the 90s. After unsuccessfully pitching their concept for Treasure Island in space 3 times over the course of a decade, they finally managed to cash in their blank check after making Hercules, and gave us the beautiful, swashbuckling and rad-as-hell adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's classic pirate story, but with cyborgs, lasers and rock music. A glorious sci-fi adventure that takes the romanticism and nostalgic charm of the high seas, but sets it against the glittering, futuristic backdrop of the ethereal. And this isn't a case of style over substance. This movie has some of the most interesting characters from this era of Disney animation, and tells a surprisingly moving story of found families, friendship, and redemption. Also, it has a solar surfer, which I think you'll find is the coolest mode of transport in cinema history. And on a technical level, Treasure Planet is something of a pioneer in the world of animation, being one of the first feature-length movies to ever blend 2D and 3D animation. And this meant it could have sweeping shots like this, allowing the metaphorical camera to move in a way that felt more in tune with the sci-fi setting, rather than being fixed in place like most traditional animation. Musker and Clements cited the filmmaking styles of Steven Spielberg and James Cameron as their inspirations for this, and I mean, who makes an adventure story on a boat without being inspired by those guys? And so they refined the deep canvas technology that Disney had developed for Tarzan to make sure Treasure Planet's cinematography felt as dynamic and as energetic as the story. But new technology does not come cheap, and at $140 million plus the usual Disney marketing blitz, Treasure Planet ended up becoming the most expensive animated movie ever made at the time of its release. And we all know what happened next. Treasure Planet flopped at the box office, failing to make its budget back and falling well short of the return that Disney had come to expect. Even if it hadn't cost the 2002 equivalent of $250 million to make, such a low box office return would still not have been considered successful by the mouse. To put it in context, adjusted for inflation, Treasure Planet was a bigger flop than Four Stick, and to this day has still never fully recovered its costs. But I'm not here to tell you that Treasure Planet is a #underrated gem, because, well, it isn't. Underrated, I mean. Treasure Planet was well received by audiences and critics at the time of its release. Its failure at the box office is mostly attributed to the fact that it was released in a Christmas window, even though Disney themselves already had a Christmas movie in theaters at the same time. And anyone in Treasure Planet's target audience who wasn't seeing that was seeing, hang on, let me just check this. Oh yeah, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And as if those two weren't enough competition for Treasure Planet, teenagers and adults in the potential audience were being scooped up by the latest James Bond movie, which, funnily enough, also kind of includes a solar surfer. So that was the competition opening weekend, and then, a few weeks into its theatrical run, when people might have been ready to go and see another movie, they had a choice between the cool-looking but unfamiliar animated movie about space pirates and The Lord of the Frickin' Rings. It also didn't help that Disney had no idea how to market this. Is it a space movie? Is it a pirate movie? Is it a comedy? Is it a bit more edgy? It's not an easy job, I admit, but that's still no excuse for coming up with the cringiest tagline in movie history.
Sometimes, courage can be the greatest treasure of all.
Wait, sorry, that's bad enough, but it's not actually the one I was talking about.
He may be on a quest for gold,
Mr. Silver?
But he better watch out for Silver.
Yeah, Treasure Planet never really stood a chance. I mean, frankly, when you look at all of this in hindsight, it's impressive it even cracked 100 million. But I should probably address something here because I know it'll come up in the comments, and that's the fact that I think a bit of a narrative has developed around this movie that Disney wanted it to fail, and that's why they released it against such strong competition. People claim that Disney wanted an excuse to kill off their expensive 2D animation arm for good so that they could put all of their resources into 3D, while others claim that Disney wanted it to flop so that they could justify not greenlighting the experimental passion projects of their other directors. And I can see why those sorts of narratives appeal to people, but I just don't think that was the case with Treasure Planet for several reasons. The first is the budget itself. This was the biggest budget Disney had ever allocated to an animated movie, and so if there was some grand conspiracy to make it fail, why would they have given it such a large blank check in the first place? The second reason is that the whole point of this movie was that it would blend Disney's 2D and 3D animation styles together, giving them the best of both worlds by keeping the iconic visual styles of their cartoons and characters, but still being able to take advantage of advancements in computer technology and 3D animation. Remember, they'd first pioneered deep canvas on Tarzan, which cost almost as much to make as Treasure Planet and was a huge hit, so it seems like they at least wanted to find out if this tech had more potential. It was an experiment, sure, and one that didn't pay off, but I don't think that they went into this project with a view to killing it before giving it a chance. And just earlier that very year, the original Lilo and Stitch had become a marketing juggernaut for Disney, and that was a 2D film. It'd be weird for Disney to not hope to repeat that success, and by all accounts, they were very much banking on Treasure Planet becoming a franchise. They had already greenlit and started scripting and storyboarding a sequel that Willem Dafoe was signed onto, and had mapped out ideas for a TV show. And in the wider world of Disney, they were planning to reopen the submarine voyage ride at Disneyland with a Treasure Planet theme, more proof that they expected Treasure Planet to be popular with general audiences. And I've already mentioned the marketing, which was crap, sure, but Treasure Planet still got the full Disney advertising treatment. There were Happy Meal times with McDonald's and action figures from Hasbro, and even a tie-in video game was made for the PS1. And that crappy trailer was shown before Spider-Man and Star Wars. Geez, 2002 was a banger of a year for franchise filmmaking. If Disney wanted this to flop, then they wouldn't have been doing everything that they could to make sure people knew this movie existed, just like they wouldn't have made it the first major studio film to ever be released in IMAX. So yeah, Disney was all in on making Treasure Planet the next big thing before its release. All of these projects only got cancelled after its terrible opening weekend. Treasure Planet didn't fail because Disney wanted it to. It failed because it fell into a perfect storm of terrible marketing and very strong competition at the box office.
It wasn't your fault, you know.
The people who saw Treasure Planet liked it, it's just not many people saw it because they were too busy watching Ron make this face. But when it was released on home media, back when home media sales actually mattered, it was the #1 bestseller on DVD and VHS, and ended up bringing in an extra $64 million for the studio. And while it doesn't have the same level of pop culture presence as Disney's other properties, it was still popular enough to justify releasing a 10th anniversary Blu-ray in 2012. And if you use Letterboxd ratings as a metric of contemporary opinions, then it's just as well reviewed by audiences as other Disney classics like Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and Hercules. So yeah, we all agree that Treasure Planet rocks, but the fact of the matter is that it was, and continues to be, one of the most high-profile box office failures for the House of Mouse. And that is exactly why it deserves a second chance. It deserves a live-action remake because this is a good story that's got a unique creative identity and franchise potential, but that through no fault of its own didn't get the success it deserved. Disney, if you're going to keep putting out these live-action remakes of your biggest, most popular movies, then can you at least take the tiniest risk and remake Treasure Planet as well, and let a new audience discover this world and story? And I know what some of you might say to this. We don't need a remake, just watch the original, it still holds up just fine. And I totally agree with you, it does. But this does raise a wider question, and one that I find myself asking basically every time I see a trailer for one of these movies. And that question is, what's the point of a live-action remake? I mean, obviously this is the point as far as the studio is concerned, but I mean, artistically, what's the point of a live-action remake, or any remake for that matter? Like, we're about to get a remake of How to Train Your Dragon that looks like it's going to be more or less a shot-for-shot remake of the original, which came out 15 years ago and was a huge hit that spawned 2 sequels, the last of which came out just 6 years ago. So what's this movie trying to accomplish? What's the artistic and creative motivation behind the filmmakers? They're not telling a new story or even doing anything to particularly refresh the old one as far as I can tell. They're just making the same movie again because the first one was popular. And to be fair, this isn't entirely new. In 1998, Gus Van Sant made a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho that added nothing to the original except colour and some more graphic violence. So what was the point? Well, when asked this, Van Sant did make some comments about paying tribute to Hitchcock and so on, but he also said, it's a marketing scheme. Why does a studio ever remake a film? Because they have this little thing they've forgotten about that they could put in the marketplace and make money from. Which is basically saying the quiet part out loud, but I think this is why these remakes sit so uncomfortably for a lot of us. Because even more than sequels or reboots, these direct remakes seem like movie making at its most cynical. It's almost impossible for the filmmakers to even pretend there's some deeper artistic purpose here. Everyone knows it's just about the money. But while that may be the case for Psycho and The Lion King and How to Train Your Dragon and so on, I do think there are circumstances in which a remake can be justified on artistic grounds. And the first is a movie like, say, King Kong, where a remake has some artistic purpose because filmmaking technology has moved on a lot since the original, meaning you can tell the same story but in a more realistic way that'll be more appealing to modern tastes. Or you'll get things like Scarface and Ocean's 11, where there was a good story or idea in the original version, but the end movie just didn't really do it justice, and so the remake is a chance to tell that story properly, often to the extent that most people don't even realize it was a remake. But this is probably a good time to point out the fact that there is a difference between a remake and a new adaptation of the same source material. A remake is a movie like Colin Farrell's Total Recall, where the source material for this movie is the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. But Denis Villeneuve's Dune is not a remake of David Lynch's, it's a new adaptation of the book. The source material for Dune is Dune, not Dune.
I suppose you think that was terribly clever.
Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is not a live-action remake of the Ralph Bakshi one, it's a new adaptation of the book in its own right, just like Treasure Planet is a new adaptation of the book, not a remake of, say, the movie from 1950, which, fun fact that's relevant to this video, was Disney's first ever live-action film. And because 1,000 comments on my video about it said so, David Fincher's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is not an English language remake of the Swedish version, it's a new adaptation of the novel. The source material and inspiration for this movie came from here, not from here. But that does bring me to the third main justification for a remake, and that is the English language remake of a foreign film. And people tend to get pretty snobby about these, saying that the foreign language original is always better and people just don't want to watch movies with subtitles. But while that may be the case, the point of an English language remake is not necessarily to try and make a better movie, it's to try and tell the same story to a new audience who are unlikely to ever see the original, and it's something that studios have been doing for decades. Studios can gauge the film's likely popularity because they know the story has already found an audience in its local language, but they can sell the remake as a new film because most English-speaking audiences won't be familiar with the original. Like, did you watch 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗏 before seeing True Lies? And funnily enough, I think this is the model for a remake of Treasure Planet. Because the original still holds up, the animation looks fantastic, the story has obviously been a classic for about 150 years, and the voice cast is outstanding. Like, come on, Emma Thompson as a cat pirate captain?
You can keep that kind of flim-flammery for your spaceport floozies, Silver.
The only thing that really dates this movie is the songs. But because it didn't have a good theatrical run, and because Disney has kind of buried it since then, a remake can be justified simply because it would be an opportunity to bring this story to a whole new generation. But it's a safer bet for the studio than an original IP because Disney knows that Treasure Planet is already popular with a core group of fans. It would be less a cynical repackaging of a beloved classic and more an opportunity to right an historical wrong, and to give a great story and a great concept a second chance at, well, greatness.
We'll begin preparations at once.
So here's my pitch for the live-action Treasure Planet, and the mission statement is to tell the same story in the same way. So this is not going to be some gritty R-rated remake. No, this is going to keep the colour and fun and humour and sincerity of the original, and will still be made to be suitable for a younger audience. So Jim Hawkins is still a rebellious teen who comes across Billy Bones' map and is chased out of town by the pirates. He and Dr. Doppler hire Captain Amelia and encounter the villainous cyborg cook Silver. And over the course of the film, Silver and Jim develop a father-son sort of bond, Jim's father having abandoned him when he was younger. I think the great thing about Treasure Planet is the fact that even though the story is very much suitable for younger audiences, the themes it explores are pretty universal, and that is why it has resonated with so many people over the years. Treasure Planet doesn't downplay or dismiss Jim's sense of isolation and lack of a sense of purpose, but rather it makes them the driving force of the narrative and then builds those into the relationship that forms the heart of the story. The fact that we know how much this bond means to Jim is what makes Silver's betrayal such a powerful moment, but it's also what makes his act of redemption so memorable. Silver is by far one of Disney's most nuanced and interesting villains, with a lot more going on under the surface than, say, Hades and Jafar. So yeah, the story in our remake stays pretty much the same. The only change I would make is to either get rid of Ben entirely, or at the very least just tone down the slapstick humor of the character by like 50%. Ben is by far the weakest part of Treasure Planet because he just feels so out of place in the world of the film, and this is made all the more jarring by the fact that he shows up 2/3 of the way into it and completely undermines the tension that has been building over the course of the last act. I know Disney likes their comic relief side characters, but we already have that in Morph and Doppler, and yeah, I know a version of this character is in the original Treasure Island story, but Ben doesn't actually contribute anything to Treasure Planet besides giving Jim a place to hide from Silver. When he finally gets his memory back, the only thing he remembers is that Captain Flint booby-trapped the gold, which we already know because they already triggered the trap. So yeah, get rid of Ben, or if you do keep him, just, dial it back a bit. As for casting, well, let me know your picks in the comments, but if you ask me, then you cast either Stephen Merchant or Richard Ayoade as Doppler, Dave Bautista as Captain Arrow, Charlie Day as Ben, and Rebecca Ferguson as Captain Amelia. Like, come on, can you imagine her delivering lines like this?
And Doctor, again, with the greatest possible respect, zip your howling screamer.
As for Jim, well, I don't really know any 16-year-old actors, but I don't think Jim necessarily needs to be an actor that audiences recognize. Instead, he should just be someone with the same naive but rebellious energy of Christian Bale in Empire of the Sun. As for Silver, well, this might be a controversial pick because he looks nothing like the original character, but my pick to play Silver would be Mads Mikkelsen. I know, just bear with me. As we've just seen, the whole point of Silver's arc is the fact that he is the main villain of the movie, but in the end, he redeems himself. Mads Mikkelsen has been a bit typecast as a villain actor, and so just like Silver in Treasure Planet is so cartoonishly villainous looking that we, like Jim, immediately mistrust him, audiences will immediately see Mads and be like, oh right, this is the bad guy. But Mads is also a talented and charismatic enough actor that he could convey the conflict Silver is feeling, and pull off the sincerity that the role requires. When Mads does play father figures, he is really good at it, and I think he could really sell the two sides to the character. It would be a role that both plays into the villain typecasting we associate with Mikkelsen, but would also subvert our expectations of that when he has a change of heart. Plus, we already know he looks great in an eye patch. Finally, as tribute to the original, bring Emma Thompson back as Jim's mum and have Joseph Gordon-Levitt come back as the voice of Scroop. I think you'd have a lot of fun with that. As for the production design, well again, just keep as close as possible to the original. The blend of sci-fi and pirate aesthetics in Treasure Planet is so much a part of its appeal that it would be crazy to change any of it. Give me a wooden spaceship with thrusters and solar sails any day of the week. And if you ask me, one of the most innovative things this movie did was introduce the concept of the Ethereum. In every sci-fi movie, space is cold, black, and full of metal. Treasure Planet made it bright and colourful and full of life like the ocean. How do the characters breathe? Who cares? It's such a simple idea in hindsight, but one that has barely ever been repeated in science fiction, and I think that's a missed opportunity. And that brings us on to the wider look of the film, and specifically the animation. As I mentioned at the start, Treasure Planet pioneered a brand new style of hybrid animation that blended 2D and 3D together, and that is one of the reasons it has such a unique visual identity. But I also think this is why a live-action remake of Treasure Planet could work so well compared to some of Disney's other remakes. One of the reasons I think a lot of these films haven't especially resonated with fans of the originals is because the animation itself was a core part of the appeal of the original. The colour and movement and life and energy that came from the animations is as fundamental to these movies as the costuming and production design is in The Lord of the Rings. So when you take a scene like this and try to make it photorealistic, it just doesn't hit the same way. By contrast, movies like Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast did, on the whole, at least try to match the tone and style of the originals, and that's what we're going for in Treasure Planet. And I think the fact that the original blends 2D and 3D animation means you can still very much capture the look and feel of the original. Yeah, some of the character designs might need toning down a bit, like we could probably do with having a few more human characters, or at least humanoid aliens, so that there's less of a need for expensive, fully digital characters. We're going for a Davy Jones's Crew sort of vibe here, just make sure Captain Amelia doesn't look like she's walked off the set of Cats. but the rule of thumb would be to replace anything 2D animated, like the characters, costumes, sets, and props, with live action counterparts, but everything 3D animated, like the Ethereum and the ships and things like Silver's arm, would still be done in a very similar style to the original, but with the same goal of trying to blend them together seamlessly enough that audiences can't tell the difference. And finally, you get Brad Bird to direct it. Bird has a huge amount of experience directing both 2D and 3D animated Disney movies that balance humor, heart, and adventure with nuanced and interesting characters who form unlikely friendships, while one of the 2 live-action movies he's made just so happens to be one of the best action movies of the century, and one that also strikes that perfect balance of adventure and fun.
Your line's not long enough! No shit!
Very few other directors working today have the storytelling talent to do justice to these characters while also having the experience of working with both live action and animated movies in the Disney system. So if anyone can direct a live action Treasure Planet, it's Brad Bird. So, Disney, just take whatever money you have set aside for the 6th Pirates of the Caribbean movie that absolutely nobody wants, and spend it on this instead. Or, you know, spend it on some original movies, but we all know that's not gonna happen. So if you're going to keep churning out these remakes, then at least do something a bit different and give Treasure Planet the chance it deserves. And hey, if it goes well, you already have a script for a sequel ready to go. Yeah, it's not quite as safe a bet as remaking some of your other movies, but just this once, show some courage and take another chance on Treasure Planet. Because sometimes, courage can be the greatest treasure of all.